If you checked the time today and saw 11:11, that wasn't random. If you felt a sudden shift in your body, a tingling sensation, or an inexplicable pull to pay attention right now, that's not coincidence. That's your nervous system recognizing a pattern that threatens everything it knows about who you are. Stay with me, because what I'm about to show you in the next 13 minutes will reveal why this specific date activates something in your neurology that most people will completely miss, and why the ones who understand this will literally rewire their brain's reality in the next 90 days, while everyone else stays locked in the same neural patterns they've been running for decades. Your brain is a prediction machine, and it's been building neural highways based on repetitive patterns since you were a child. Every time you see repeating numbers, every time you feel that inexplicable pull towards something, your nervous system is detecting a pattern interruption. Your reticular activating system, the part of your brain that filters what you pay attention to, suddenly flags this as significant. But here's what neuroscience reveals that changes everything. It's not the number itself that matters. It's what your brain does in that moment of recognition. When you notice 11:11, when you feel that shift, your prefrontal cortex momentarily overrides your automatic programming. For a split second, you're conscious. And in that split second, you have access to neural pathways that are normally locked behind your subconscious automation. Let me explain what I mean by neural highways, because once you understand this, you'll see why most people stay stuck their entire lives. Your brain operates through a principle called neuroplasticity, the ability of neural networks to reorganize based on experience. When you were a child, your brain was forming between 700 to 1,000 new neural connections every single second. Every experience, every emotion, every repeated thought carved pathways through your brain like water carving rivers through stone. By the time you hit adolescence, your brain began pruning. It kept the highways you used most frequently and eliminated the paths you didn't travel. This is efficiency. Your brain is trying to automate as much as possible so you don't have to consciously think about breathing, walking, or performing thousands of daily tasks. But here's the problem that most people never recognize. Your brain automated your emotional responses too. It automated your stress reactions. It automated your self-image. It automated your beliefs about what's possible for you. And by age 35, research shows that 95% of who you are is a set of memorized behaviors, automatic emotional reactions, hardwired beliefs, and subconscious patterns that your conscious mind isn't even aware of. Think about this scientifically. You wake up tomorrow morning, your alarm goes off. Before your eyes are fully open, your hand reaches for your phone. You check the same apps in the same order. You feel the same subtle anxiety or dread about the day ahead. You shower on autopilot. You eat similar foods. You drive the same route to work. You react to the same triggers with the same emotions. You have the same conversations with the same people about the same topics. By the time you go to bed, you've activated roughly the same neural circuits in the same sequences as yesterday. And here's what the neuroscience reveals. Your brain just strengthened those exact same neural pathways again. The highways got wider, the automation got stronger, and tomorrow it will be even harder to think a new thought or make a different choice because the familiar pathways have less resistance. This is where most neuroscience explanations stop. They tell you that you're stuck in patterns. They tell you about neuroplasticity, but they don't tell you about the war happening inside your nervous system right now. And they definitely don't tell you why dates like February 11th at 11:11 actually create a neurological window that you can use to interrupt these patterns. Type rewire if you're ready to understand what's actually happening in your brain right now. Neuroscience reveals about your conscious mind versus your subconscious mind versus your autonomic nervous system. Your conscious mind, that voice in your head right now listening to these words, represents about 5% of your total brain activity. It's your prefrontal cortex. It's logical, creative, future-oriented. It can set intentions, make plans, and decide what you want to change about your life. Your subconscious mind is the other 95%. It's operating from the limbic brain, the basal ganglia, the cerebellum, the regions that run automatic programs. And here's the crucial part. Your subconscious mind doesn't care about your goals or your dreams or your conscious intentions. It cares about one thing only: keeping you alive by maintaining familiar patterns. Because to your survival brain, familiar equals safe, even if familiar is miserable. But there's a third player most people don't understand: your autonomic nervous system. This is your body's operating system. It controls your heart rate, your breathing, your digestion, your hormonal output, your immune response, all without your conscious input. And here's where the neuroscience gets fascinating. Your autonomic nervous system learns through repetition combined with elevated emotion. When you experience something with strong emotion, fear, excitement, love, trauma, your brain releases neurochemicals that tag that experience as significant. Your autonomic nervous system literally memorizes that emotional state at a cellular level. Do it repeatedly, and your body becomes conditioned to produce that emotional chemistry automatically. This is why you can consciously want change while your body is addicted to being you. Let me give you a real example from my research. I studied brain scans of a woman who came to me with chronic anxiety. She consciously wanted to feel calm. She tried meditation apps, breathing exercises, positive thinking. Nothing worked long term. When we scanned her brain, we discovered something profound. Her baseline state, her body's familiar chemical signature, was anxiety. For 30 years, she had unconsciously conditioned her body to produce cortisol, adrenaline, and stress hormones as her normal state. Her cells had literally developed receptor sites that expected these chemicals. When she tried to meditate and feel calm, her body went into withdrawal. Just like an addict without their substance, her cells were screaming for the familiar chemistry of stress. Within 72 hours of feeling calm, her body would create a crisis, a fight with her partner, a work emergency, a panic attack, anything to return to the familiar emotional state her cells were addicted to. This is the biological addiction concept, and it's why trying harder fails. You can't fight your automated neurology with willpower. Willpower is conscious effort from your prefrontal cortex. Your hardwired neural pathways operate automatically from the basal ganglia. You can't fight automation with effort. There's a neurological reason willpower fails, and when you understand it, you'll stop fighting yourself and start rewiring yourself. Now, this is where neuroscience meets quantum physics, and I need you to stay with me because this is where the 1111 portal concept actually has scientific basis. Your brain produces electromagnetic fields. Every thought you think generates measurable electrical activity. Every emotion you feel creates coherent or incoherent patterns in your heart's electromagnetic field, which is 5,000 times stronger than your brain's field. These fields don't stop at your skull or your chest. They extend into the space around you. This is measurable physics, not mysticism. And here's where it connects to quantum field theory. At the quantum level, everything is energy and information. The observer effect in quantum mechanics shows that the act of observation influences the behavior of subatomic particles. Now, I'm not saying you can manifest a car with your thoughts. But what the neuroscience does show is this: your brain's electromagnetic signature, created by your habitual thoughts and emotions, literally influences what you perceive and what you notice in your environment. Let me show you how this works practically. Two people walk into the same job interview. Person A has spent 30 years wiring neural pathways around the identity, "I'm not good enough." Their baseline emotional state is subtle anxiety and self-doubt. When they walk into that interview, their nervous system is scanning the environment through a filter of threat detection. Their amygdala is primed. They notice the interviewer's slight frown, but miss the smile. They interpret neutral questions as criticism. Their body language unconsciously communicates uncertainty. Person B has different neural wiring. Their identity is, "I'm someone who learns and grows." Their baseline emotional state is curiosity and openness. Same interview room, same interviewer, same questions, but their nervous system is scanning for opportunity, not threat. They notice the interviewer's genuine interest. They interpret questions as invitations to showcase their thinking. Their body language communicates confidence. Same external reality, completely different perceived reality, completely different outcome. And it all came down to their neurological wiring and the electromagnetic signature their brain and heart were broadcasting. This is what I mean when I say your personality creates your personal reality. Your personality is nothing more than your habitual patterns of thinking, feeling, and behaving. Those patterns are neural circuits that have fired so many times they've become your automated self. And those automated patterns create an electromagnetic signature that quite literally filters what you perceive, how you interpret it, and how you respond to it. Here's where it gets fascinating from a neuroscience perspective, and this is the part that changes everything. Your brain doesn't distinguish between who you are and who you think you are. Let me say that again. Your brain cannot tell the difference between your actual identity and your repeated thoughts about who you are. When you repeatedly think, I'm someone who struggles with money, your brain accepts that as identity and begins firing neural networks that support that identity. It activates memories of past financial struggles. It produces stress chemistry when you think about money. It creates predictive models that expect financial problems. And then your behavior automatically aligns with that neural programming. You unconsciously avoid opportunities. You make decisions from scarcity. You miss possibilities that someone with different neural wiring would see clearly. It's not that you lack intelligence or capability. It's that your brain is being your automated identity, not your conscious intentions. This is why behavior follows identity, and it happens through a mechanism called predictive processing. Your brain is constantly predicting what should happen next based on past patterns. It's trying to minimize, surprise, and conserve energy. When your neural identity says, I'm anxious, your brain predicts anxiety in upcoming situations and literally primes your nervous system to experience anxiety before the situation even occurs. When your neural identity says, I'm confident, your brain predicts success and primes your physiology for confident behavior. The identity shift isn't motivational psychology, it's neuroscience. Change who you neurologically think you are, and your brain automatically reorganizes its predictive models, which changes your automatic behavior, which changes your reality. I worked with someone whose entire neural signature was organized around the identity, I'm depressed. They had been diagnosed at 19, and for 16 years, their brain had wired and fired around that identity. Depression wasn't just a temporary state, it had become their neurological operating system. But here's what happened when we did brain scans after they began mentally rehearsing a new identity. I'm someone whose brain is reorganizing toward vitality. They didn't try to force positive thinking or fight their depression with willpower. They simply began imagining with specific sensory detail and elevated emotion what it would feel like to be someone whose brain naturally produced vitality. They rehearsed this identity for 15 minutes every morning and evening. Within 6 weeks, we saw measurable changes in their prefrontal cortex activity. The networks associated with rumination and negative prediction were quieting. New networks were forming. By month 3, their baseline neurochemistry had shifted. They weren't trying to be happy. Their brain had simply reorganized around a different identity, and the emotional states followed automatically. Comment coherence. If this neuroscience resonates, because what I'm about to show you next explains why most people sabotage right when their brain begins reorganizing, and there's one biological response causing it. Here's where most people's nervous system wins the war against change, and it's exactly where you must override it. When you start thinking differently, feeling differently, and behaving differently, your brain detects unfamiliar neural activity. And here's what happens biologically. Your amygdala, your survival alarm system, interprets unfamiliar as dangerous. It doesn't matter if the new patterns are objectively better for you. Your survival brain doesn't care about better. It cares about familiar. So when you start to change, your amygdala activates your sympathetic nervous system. Cortisol floods your bloodstream, adrenaline spikes, your heart rate increases, your thinking becomes narrow and rigid. You feel anxiety, doubt, fear, or even panic. And your conscious mind creates stories to justify these feelings. This isn't working. I'm doing it wrong. Maybe I'm not capable of changing. Maybe I should just accept who I am. This is the survival response, and it's not a sign you're failing. It's actually a sign your brain is changing. Every single person who successfully rewires their neurology goes through this phase. The difference between people who transform and people who quit is understanding that this response is temporary neurological reorganization, not truth about your capability. That biological response I mentioned earlier, your body has become addicted to the chemistry of your old self, and when you stop feeding it the familiar emotional cocktail of stress or anxiety or unworthiness or whatever your default state has been, your cells go into withdrawal. They send urgent signals to your brain: create a crisis, generate the familiar emotion, return to homeostasis. And if you don't understand the neuroscience, you'll interpret these signals as evidence that change isn't possible for you. Type yes if you felt this survival resistance, because I want you to know this is normal neurology, not personal failure. I had someone tell me once, week 1 of my new practice felt amazing. I felt hopeful and energized. Week 2, everything fell apart. I had 3 panic attacks. My old anxiety came back worse than ever. I was convinced meditation was making me worse. But here's what was actually happening neurologically. Week 1, the novelty activated their brain's reward system. Dopamine release, excitement. Week 2, their body realized the familiar stress chemistry wasn't coming. Withdrawal symptoms began. Their amygdala flagged this as danger. Their nervous system created the panic attacks to force a return to familiar emotional chemistry. Week 5, something shifted. The new neural pathways had strengthened enough that their brain's predictive models began updating. The survival response quieted. By week 8, the new patterns felt natural. Their nervous system had reorganized around a new baseline. This is the predictable arc of neurological transformation, and most people quit during week 2 or 3 when they're actually on the edge of breakthrough. Your brain operates in 2 primary modes. Survival mode is run by your sympathetic nervous system and your limbic brain. When you're in survival mode, you're focused on the known, the familiar, the predictable. You're protecting what you have. You're avoiding loss. You're playing defense. Blood flow moves away from your prefrontal cortex toward your hindbrain and body. Your thinking becomes rigid and repetitive. Your perception narrows to threats. Your creativity shuts down. Creative mode is run by your parasympathetic nervous system and your prefrontal cortex. When you're in creative mode, you're open to new possibilities. You're thinking about the future. You're imagining beyond your current circumstances. Blood flow moves to your frontal lobe. Your perception expands. You see opportunities. You feel inspired to act. Now here's the critical insight. You cannot create a new future while your body is living in survival mode from your past. You cannot rewire your neural pathways while stress hormones are keeping you locked in familiar patterns. This is why meditation and mental rehearsal are neurologically essential. They're the tools that shift you from survival chemistry to creative chemistry. Don't skip this next part, because one missing piece of this brain science will determine whether you actually change or just intellectually understand change. Environment is invisible neural programming. You've been hardwiring your brain through repetition and emotion, but you've also been hardwiring through environmental conditioning. Mirror neurons in your brain fire not just when you perform an action, but when you observe someone else performing it. When you're around people who complain, your brain fires complaint networks. When you're around people who are anxious, your brain activates anxiety circuits. This isn't about being judgmental, it's neuroscience. Your brain is designed to sync with the nervous systems around you for survival purposes. In ancestral environments, this kept you safe. If everyone in your tribe suddenly looked afraid, your brain immediately activated fear responses without needing to know why. You survived by syncing. But in modern life, this mechanism works against transformation. You spend 3 months rewiring your neural pathways toward a new identity. You're creating coherence in your meditation practice. You're thinking differently. Then you go have dinner with family members who've known you for 30 years. They unconsciously expect the old you. They bring up old stories. They ask familiar questions. And here's what happens neurologically. Their nervous systems are broadcasting the old version of you. Your mirror neurons start firing old patterns. The familiar environment activates familiar neural circuits. Within 20 minutes, you're thinking, feeling, and behaving like the old you again. Not because you're weak, because your brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do: sync with your environment. This is why protecting your mental environment isn't optional if you're serious about neurological transformation. You cannot build new neural pathways while constantly exposing yourself to triggers that activate old ones. This means being strategic about who you spend time with during your rewiring period. It means controlling your media consumption. Every video you watch, every piece of content you consume is either reinforcing old neural patterns or supporting new ones. It means creating a physical environment that cues your new identity rather than your old one. Your brain learns through association. If you meditate in the same chair every day, that chair becomes a neural cue that activates your meditation networks. If you're trying to quit smoking, but you keep sitting on the same porch where you used to smoke, that location triggers the neural pathways associated with smoking. Environment is invisible programming, and you must make it visible and then make it intentional. This is what I'm going to give you that you can apply starting tonight. The mental rehearsal technique is the most powerful neuroplasticity tool we have, and it works through a specific mechanism. When you vividly imagine an experience with focused attention and elevated emotion, your brain activates the same neural networks as if you were actually having that experience. Athletes have known this for decades. Mental rehearsal creates measurable improvements in physical performance. But here's what most people miss. Mental rehearsal doesn't just improve skills, it rewires identity. I want you to get specific about this. Every night before sleep and every morning before you engage with the external world, you're going to do a 12 to 15-minute mental rehearsal practice. Why these times? Because right before sleep, your brainwave state naturally drops from beta into alpha and theta. These slower brainwave frequencies are when your subconscious mind is most receptive to new programming. It's the same state you were in as a child when your brain was absorbing everything without filters. Morning is when you set your nervous system's baseline for the day. If you immediately check your phone, you're letting external stimuli determine your neural activation patterns. Instead, you're claiming the first minutes of consciousness to intentionally activate the neural networks you're trying to wire. Sit or lie comfortably. Close your eyes. Begin by bringing your awareness to your breath. This alone starts to shift you from sympathetic to parasympathetic nervous system activation. Then, instead of visualizing what you want to happen externally, you're going to rehearse who you want to be internally. This is the crucial difference most people miss. You're not imagining yourself getting a promotion or finding a relationship or having money. You're imagining being the neurological identity who would naturally create those outcomes. You're rehearsing the thoughts this person thinks, the emotions this person feels, the way this person moves through their day. You're engaging all your senses. What would you see through the eyes of this new identity? What would you hear? How would your body feel, your posture, your energy, your breath? And here's the critical neuroscience component. You must generate the elevated emotion. Gratitude, joy, inspiration, love, excitement, whatever emotion you would feel if this identity was already your reality. Because remember, emotion is the chemical signature that tells your autonomic nervous system this experience matters. Emotion is what moves information from short-term circuitry to long-term wiring. You rehearse this for 10 to 12 minutes. You do it with such specificity and emotional intensity that your brain cannot tell the difference between the rehearsal and the reality. And here's what happens neurologically. You're firing and wiring new neural networks. You're creating new synaptic connections. You're producing new proteins that strengthen these connections. You're signaling new genes that create neurochemical changes. You're literally installing new hardware in your brain. Research shows it takes 21 to 30 days minimum for measurable synaptic changes. It takes 90 days for lasting transformation, where the new patterns become more automatic than the old ones. This is not a quick fix. This is neurological reconditioning, but it works with the brain's actual mechanisms instead of fighting them. I studied someone who did this practice every morning and evening for 12 weeks. They were rehearsing the identity of someone whose nervous system was naturally calm and resourceful. Within 60 days, we measured a 32% decrease in baseline cortisol levels. Their heart rate variability, a key indicator of nervous system resilience, improved by 47%. By month 3, they reported that their default response to stress had completely changed. They weren't trying to stay calm in challenging situations. Calm had become their automatic response because their brain had reorganized around that neural signature, right? Commit. if you're ready for this 90-day practice, because the neuroscience is clear. If you're consistent with this, your brain will change. The question is whether your conscious commitment can outlast your survival brain's resistance. Let me show you how all of this comes together neurologically, because this is where most people either get it or miss it entirely. Your neural pathways create your perception. Your perception shapes your emotional responses. Your emotions trigger neurochemical cascades. Those chemicals signal your genes to create specific proteins. Those proteins build and regulate your cells. Your cells create your tissues and organs. Your body becomes the physical manifestation of your unconscious mind. And your unconscious mind, your automated neural programming, creates the filter through which you perceive and respond to reality. This is the loop. This is why you can't think your way out of patterns you felt your way into. This is why intellectual understanding doesn't create transformation. This is why you must work at the level of neural circuitry, emotional chemistry, and identity reorganization. February 11th at 11:11 isn't magic, but your brain's pattern recognition system flagging it as significant creates a moment of conscious awareness. And in that moment, you have a choice. You can let it pass and return to your automated neural programming, or you can use it as a neurological interruption, a cue to remember that you are not hardwired, you are soft-wired. And soft wiring can be changed through conscious intention combined with elevated emotion and consistent practice. The portal isn't in the numbers. The portal is in your nervous system's momentary break from automation. The portal is in your prefrontal cortex, recognizing that something beyond your familiar patterns is possible. And the portal closes the moment you return to familiar thinking, familiar feeling, and familiar behavior. You can watch this video, find it interesting, and return to the exact same neural activation patterns you were running before you clicked play. Or you can decide that starting tonight, you're going to engage the mental rehearsal practice. You're going to sit in front of your familiar self and rehearse your new identity with such clarity and emotion that your brain begins building new circuits. You're going to do it for 90 days, regardless of what your survival brain tells you during the resistance phase. You're going to protect your environment, you're going to become conscious of unconscious patterns, and you're going to trust the neuroscience even when you can't see immediate external changes. Hit like to signal to your brain that this information matters. That single action tells your nervous system to prioritize this neural pathway and strengthens the network we just built in the last 13 minutes. Subscribe, because in the next video, I'm revealing the exact 15-minute morning practice that creates heart-brain coherence and activates your prefrontal cortex before the day's stress hormones flood your system. The evening mental rehearsal rewires while you sleep. The morning coherence practice locks it in while you're awake. You need both for complete neurological transformation, and most people only do one or the other and wonder why change doesn't stick. You don't lack discipline. Your body is addicted to being you. But addiction can be broken through new neural conditioning. The survival brain can't tell the difference between a real threat and an imagined one, which means it also can't tell the difference between a real experience and one vividly rehearsed with emotion. Where you place your attention is where you place your energy. Where you place your energy is where you build neural circuitry. Where you build neural circuitry determines who you become, and who you become creates your personal reality. Your thoughts are the language of the brain. Your feelings are the language of the body, and when your brain and body are working together in coherence, you're not trying to force change. You are change at a neurological level. The 11:11 portal was just your nervous system reminding you that you have the biological capacity to reorganize who you are. What you do in the next 12 hours will determine whether that portal opened into transformation or closed back into familiar patterns. The neuroscience is clear. The practice is proven. The only variable is your commitment to override survival programming long enough for new patterns to become automatic. That's the work, that's the transformation, and that's what we're going to dive even deeper into next time.